This is, well, a long report, but my god. So I had been planning to take some LSD at this punk show in Austin, Texas. I tripped acid around 50 plus times, but I cry against my will even thinking about this trip in particular. It was the one time the mighty me, somebody who never loses control, would go completely nuts and nearly suffer dire consequences. Okay. We stopped by my house as a meeting spot so that we could begin following the others to the show. I was in the car with my friends Jordan and Andrew. In the other car would be some characters known to me as Aaron, Robert, and Shane. Nobody else I knew dropped acid at the show. I ate 2 slices of the gel, right? It would take effect way faster than it ever had before. I felt like I had taken something almost as soon as the shit landed on my tongue, but in actuality it took hold within 25 to 30 minutes. Now, placebo or not, I knew I had a chemical in my body, and it was about to do its work. See, we had a 1-hour drive from X to Y, so I knew it would be kicking in by the time of arrival. And it would be at this time that all words would become meaningless and not worth saying, because words couldn't put together anything that I was feeling or doing. But I knew exactly what I was doing, right? I was sitting in the back of the car, and everything was coming to life before my very eyes. I began to see 3D flowers pulsating from the back seat, and they were getting very playful with each other. And the more happy I felt about them, the more sensitive and swooshy they would get. I felt put on the spot. I had to look at myself in the mirror just to reassure myself that I was still there. I was just becoming an amorphous blob. A good old puddle of fuckness it was, in my mind. I could tell I was coming up harder than I ever had in my life, and I gotta be honest, I was unprepared. I was sweating bullets. It brought a very weird sensation that I've never felt again since. As if my skin was melting. I literally felt my skin just melting downwards with the sweat. I almost fooled myself into thinking, yeah, I'm actually fucking melting right now. But good thing I still had about an ounce of willpower left to control my senses. The fear starts kicking in hard soon after that, and regret of taking the drug. But why? I repented in my mind, praying for us to get to this damn show faster so that I can just get this all over with. I remember this being a very important thing to me, even though the thought of being there scared me to death. I already knew I was going to have a really bad trip, but I didn't want to spoil anybody's fun and have them turn around and drive me fucking home. I was actually taking every ounce of my physical and mental strength to even sit in the back seat of the car. I was so lost within myself, I thought that I was painstakingly dragging this car to the show all by myself. Funny that nobody else gave a shit. Nobody even knew the importance of this show or how this would be the one thing that turns me into a nicotine stain on the fabric of society. Now, once we got to the venue, my door swung wide open, and a bunch of really hairy people that looked like wolfmen grabbed me and pulled me out of the car. I looked up and saw this group of strange people, and they were saying things like, "Damn, how much did he take? Bad trip," and "How's the weather over there?" I couldn't tell one person from the next. For instance, I look at Shane, but he's wearing my friend Kingsley's face, and he isn't even at the show. I thought I knew who I was looking at, but the faces all looked the same. Dark, really fuzzy, some being very reptilian and sculpted. I would go with the flow of this feeling, I decided, and leave my body for periods of time where perception would go totally haywire. Everything around me was washing into an ancient and evil machine that was riddled with blood and flesh. This great construct's gears crushing the bones of the living to dust, with serrated steel teeth that clenched thousands of people within. The strongest of men would be at the front row of teeth to represent the power of the machine, and to let it be known that none would be able to conquer nor even understand it. It was a rusty piece of work with no rhyme or reason other than bending people to its will and killing them if we would resist. I found myself inside the venue. I could feel a lake of sweat pouring down my entire body. I'm walking around holding my ticket out in front of me like a moron. Walking felt like I was walking on water, if you can even imagine what that feels like. Safety first. I see a large pole in the middle of the place and decide to wrap my entire body around it like a snake to keep my balance. The music was knocking me off my feet, and I needed support. Ravenous black and blue outlined cats ran across the floor, very agitated and wet pussies, and I had to really watch my step at this point. The mosh pit turned into a whirling vortex of fists, knives, and assault weapons. People ran by me and would throw themselves violently into the vortex, some grabbing me, trying to take me with them. The crowd was not even human anymore. I didn't even know why I was here. I was now in hell. These people were just not normal to me, as they'd become very mutated and vampiric. The world seemed very alien, and they all stormed and stomped in a great circle, laughing and chanting my name, while I'm in the middle wrapped around this pole for dear life. They began pulling out AKs, machetes, RPGs, and fired all their guns and missiles into the ceiling for a while before the devil himself stepped onto the stage. Very casually, I began to speak. He screamed in a very high-pitched voice, stating, "How the fuck you guys doing? We are Holy Fucking Grail!" A very loud note was hit after this, and I saw two sexy women, legs spread wide open to a fiery fucking explosion, of course, that rose from the stage, thus revealing the most epic show that I'd ever fucking seen. The front man, who I'd assumed was Satan, was growing to a gargantuan size as the song began. And for the moment, it seemed like it was just me and him. He pointed at my face like something out of a 3D movie and nodded at me, his hair flickering all around and curling into snakes at the ends that hissed at me. He was most definitely welcoming me to my new chaotic home, and all the gutter punks began to have this giant orgy at this point, covered in blood, and a lot of them were touching me, trying to assassinate my sense of character and humiliate me sexually. All words and sounds were inaudible, other than it sounding a lot like Dragon Force. I let go of the pole and hit my face on the floor. I was crawling around the sticky, bottomless pit when suddenly I was helped up by some brave soldier who had enough time to dodge all the explosions. These homosexual demons and the ravenous cats. I was then slammed against a wall before that I turned around, feeling my way around it, until I found a staircase that led far into the ceiling. I sat on the very bottom step and was almost forced into staring at the ground itself, trying to ignore the intense visuals. I kept hallucinating that I was looking off at the balcony of the building itself, but I saw myself falling from it fast to my death, over and over and over again, until it completely spiraled out of control, throwing my vision into a never-ending kaleidoscope of Nazi Germany and all of its very important people. I would look over to the door that led to the balcony, and I started to tear up and eventually cried. I felt like I was going to be thrown off the balcony by this force at any moment, and nothing could help me. And right when my fear hit its breaking point, I see the whole entire building just fucking collapse, with everybody in it. And over and over and over again, this cruel but perfect visualization would repeat itself until I couldn't possibly be any more scared. It was as if my fear itself just broke, snapped in half, and the image of my shattered soul and mind had been burned into my eyes. I saw Jordan in front of me now, and all around him that I could see was an infinite pattern of stairs cascading violently in and out of each other, with him stuck in the center, trying to get my attention with facial expressions. I remember Jordan saying to me, "Well, first you went cross-eyed, put your hand in an L shape around your mustache, pointed over towards some people standing at the bar, took a really deep breath, and began shouting, 'Watch out! The fucking stairs.' He also said any time that he saw me at the show, I'd be paralyzed, taking enormous breaths, and that I would smile at the ground every few seconds. But then I'd go back into a very serious, jaw-dropping, and petrified stare. He reports that he was worried about my mental health at this time. Now, the worst feeling of all was coming on. Feeling completely abandoned. I knew that my friends were going to leave without me at this point and be laughing their asses off about it all the way home. Yucking it up and shit saying, "Yeah, we sure showed that guy Bo," me, leaving him back there tripping and shit. I just sat back and accepted it like nothing, though. I figured I had already accepted that I was dead by this point and that my very soul fabric would be stained for the rest of my life. No matter what I did, no matter where I sat or stood, or what thought I could think, everything was a life or death decision at this point. This was do or die. Everything was absolutely hazardous to my health and well-being. I couldn't shake the feeling of being left here to die. I had put all of my trust into my friends, and for them to just drive me to hell and leave me there just wasn't them. And now, I'd finally see the light. Through all this madness and chaos, this was not who I expected to see in hell. I saw Jesus Christ standing in a window, smiling and waving for my attention. I ran to him as fast as I could and stood before him for a while, staring straight into his face, gasping for breath, sweat pouring down my face. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I was so happy that if anyone could help me in this situation, it would be him. He kept speaking, but it sounded like he just inhaled a shitload of helium, so I couldn't understand. I grabbed him by the shoulders, and I'm all like, "Thank God you're here." His lips moved again, but I couldn't understand. I sat and smiled crazily at him, still holding his shoulders. I just kept yelling, "What?" at him, getting closer and closer to his face each time because I couldn't fucking hear what he had to say, and I was getting pissed. So, at some point, one of my friends directs me outside and is leading me away. Apparently Jesus was trying to sell me something cool and shiny. I was led outside of the car until we were driving home, just me and Jordan. I asked him about 1,000 times if he knew where we were and if they were going to leave me. He reminded me that I was perfectly fine and that they weren't going anywhere without me. But I had to reassure myself every 2 minutes that this wasn't happening. After being in the car for a timeless amount of time, I began to feel, honestly, way better. And the ego death began to cease. I was feeling what I normally felt when I took acid, and was happy to embrace the creamy tenderness. I also realized that this whole scene took place within a 3-hour period, and that I still had many hours to go. I got home, and my dad was waiting for me at the door because he had some new fishing poles for me and my brother, who was flying in the next morning. I'd forgotten all about it. Trying to avoid my dad, I tell him the fishing poles are fucking beautiful, and then run to my room and plop down on my couch. I lit a bowl and sighed really relief-like. I fucking made it. I cheered. I was disassociated the rest of the night, going over what just happened to me and being amazed how fast a trip can switch gears on you. I listened to a Jimi Hendrix blues album and watched some old Black Sabbath videos on VHS, and I kept going into that lopsided world of wackiness. dimensions on objects really took amazing and bendy forms. I could see patterns on everything I looked at, and they crawled over everything I could see. Electricity was shooting out of me in all directions and wrapping around various objects, creating enormous grids outlined with equations and the very fundamentals of geometry. My room seemed to be made of sand, and small pyramids were forming across my tile floor. My forehead was darting up and outwards from my skull in the mirror, creating a crazy red bird mohawk on my head. I could see the molecules floating through the air and see every slight detail and more. The color was really bright and high contrast looking, but sometimes it would get dim and serious on me. The room was alive and clever. It wanted to wash me away, and I naturally fought it off, feeling weak. I kept having these momentary flashbacks, shattered fragments of the show, and it just blew my fucking balls off, man. I kept hearing the guitar screaming solos while my body convulsed, and I would see myself from a bird's eye view sitting on the stairs. Then I'd go even higher, and I'd be looking down at the venue from the sky, but I couldn't stop it. I soared even higher, and the next thing I knew, I was seeing the entire world from space. Everybody I ever tripped with to that point was standing around the Earth in a circle and were just oscillating. They even showed the characteristics that they usually showed while tripping. And somehow, I just knew that we were all here in some fucked up way. I could feel a wobbling feeling, and the visuals went from side to side for a moment, like I was on a boat, before it was just me looking down at myself from the bird's eye view again. I was still at the show, in my mind's eye.